Welcome to the Delicious Dignity Podcast. Let's settle in securely and ever so nicely into the brilliance of our own dignity. Hello, lovelies. As you know, there are many different series or themes in this podcast, in the whole Delicious Dignity podcast, that is about different topics and topics that can't be all covered in one episode. And this is part of another series within the podcast that's going to be about intuition training and how to develop strong intuition, how to have good intuition, how to benefit from having strong intuition. And one of the things that I feel like is a very useful skill when we talk about developing intuition is how to have intuition even when you have a mind that's full of fear, full of doubt, full of hesitation, full of confusion. Because that happens to the best of us. It will happen to beginners. It will happen to advanced people. At some point, as you get more advanced, your mind will become quieter and quieter. But to some extent, we will always have the mind. And this is an episode about how to work with the mind while still being able to develop and have and trust strong intuition. I'm going to talk about this both from a beginner perspective and an advanced perspective. So you have both in your arsenal, and advanced folks will see that they can benefit from the tips I give to beginner folks. Beginner folks will see that they can benefit from the tips I give to the advanced folks. So this whole episode is for you, but just know I'm going to cover it in many layers, okay? So the first thing I want to say is that sometimes, actually, a lot of the times, your mind thinks it is the soul. It thinks it is your spirit. Your mind thinks it knows everything. And the truth is, your mind is an artifact of the past. It's developed over years and years and years of conditioning, of living, of experiences. And it doesn't know everything. It is not the soul. And this particular method, this blind reading method, is about going beyond your mind. It's about bypassing your mind. You're not trying to control it. You're not trying to force it to not have thoughts or fears. You're simply bypassing it. You're going around the problem instead of, imagine there's a pothole in the road, and instead of going into the pothole, or instead of covering the pothole with cement and doing all this work, you're simply going around it for a little bit, just so that you can continue on your journey. So that's what this method is about. The mind creates systems of fear that will sort of interrupt your intuition. For example, I use this method when I know I'm very biased. I have a very strong opinion about something and my mind thinks it knows everything. So I use this method when I know that I'm really biased about something. I use this method when I can't be objective. So that bias causes me to lose objectivity. And while some people argue you can't be 100% objective, nobody can do that. Intuition training is about having a certain level of detachment so you can see the truth. And even if you can't see 100% of the truth, at least you can see 5% of the truth, which is a heck of a lot more than what people who don't have intuition or not developing it can see. I use this method sometimes also with friends, because I'm very invested and biased and subjective with my friends. And sometimes when friends have asked for a reading, I have not been able to do it as well because I was so biased. And this method of reading came from that desire to do better with doing readings for my friends and giving them a thoroughly objective, truthful stance. Now, I don't often do readings for friends, but in case the opportunity comes and I really have to do it like an emergency, it's there for me. I also feel like this method is especially useful when you have too many potentials or too many outcomes or too many options to choose from. For example, you want to buy a house and you have 5 houses that you want to determine which house is good for you, which of the 5 houses. You pull out, there are 5 different potentials. Actually, there are 6 because it could be that the perfect house for you has not yet come on the market. So there are 6 potentials. There are 6 individual consciousnesses or energies for you to tune into. This method works really well for that. It also works when you have high anxiety. In general, I don't recommend doing intuitive work when you have high anxiety. I always recommend grounding and calming down first, but sometimes we have anxiety despite our best efforts. This method works to sort of bypass the anxious brain or the anxious, fearful mind. I also use it, and I recommend that people use it when there's a high risk question or a high risk opportunity that you want to know more about, like choosing a house is one of them. Maybe there's a surgery you want to know more about that you may or may not want to take, something like this. Anything that's high risk. Maybe you want to move to a different country and you don't know which country. You can use it for that purpose too. You can also just use it for fun. This intuition is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be joyful and a deeply profound experience. So you can just use it for fun. You can also use it when you're trying to develop trust in your intuition. You can use it when you're trying to develop trust in a particular deck of cards that you haven't used before and you're getting used to them. And this is a good way to train in that method, or rather for that circumstance. I have used this from a fun perspective, just to give you an example of what I mean. I've used it with clients who are brand new to me because they don't know me, right? They don't trust me, and I completely understand that. And they just sometimes don't even know what question to ask. So before they can even tell me what the question is, I start giving them the information that they need about the question they didn't even ask. That helps them develop trust in the process and also open up energetically and intuitively to their own intuition and their own spirit. And the last piece that I use this method for is there have been times, it hasn't happened often, thank God, but there have been moments in my life where I simply cannot access my intuition. And there were a bunch of reasons for that. One of them was trauma, and I had gone through a particularly traumatic event. Another one was I was just feeling ill and weak, and I just couldn't access my intuition easily. When that happens, I suggest using this method. Okay, now that I explained to you when you can use this method, here is the actual method. The method, just simply put, is blind reading. You're just going to read completely blind. Now, what do I mean blind? I mean that you don't know what the question is, that you just got the answer for. So you know the answer, but you don't know the question. The other way a blind reading can work is when you don't know the question or the answer. So these are the two ways that you can do a blind reading. And you're probably thinking, well, if I don't know the question and I don't know the answer, then how is it a reading? I will tell you in a second, okay? Let me start with the basic way to do this reading, and then we will evolve it into other ways, and you'll see what I mean. So for the purposes of simplicity, let's just use the example I gave you earlier, which house to buy. Okay, now you can obviously adapt this to many examples, but we'll just use this just for explanation purposes. I have 5 houses to choose from. Which house do I buy? And like I said, that doesn't mean you have 5 options. It means you have 6 options. Or it even means you could have 7 options. So it could be the 5 houses, like house 1, house 2, house 3, house 4, etc. The 6th option is not about a house. It's an answer that just says it's none of these houses. And the 7th option is to just wait. It could be one of these houses, but it's a not right now kind of situation. So there are really 7 options, okay? You write down each of these options on pieces of paper. House 1 is 1 piece of paper. House 2 is another piece of paper. Option 6 is another piece of paper, etc. So at the end, you're left with 7 pieces of paper. You crumple each of those 7 pieces up, and then you jumble them up. So you don't know which option is which. So you still know the question, which is which house do I buy, but you don't know which house is which piece of paper because they're crumpled up and you can't tell. So you shake them up, you place them on a table, and now you imagine that there's someone in front of you. If you're doing a reading for a client, then you imagine the client. If you're doing the reading for yourself, then you imagine yourself in front of yourself. You repeat the question to yourself, which is, which house do I buy? And then you pick the first crumpled ball of paper and you put it in front of you. You tune into the energy of the ball of paper. Now, advanced folks will understand what I mean. If you are a beginner and you can't understand what I mean by tuning into the energy of a crumpled piece of paper, what you can do instead is just imagine this option has an energy of its own. Whatever the option is, you don't know what it is. And imagine that energy is like a ball of light around the piece of paper. It's neutral light. Don't give it a color. Don't give it anything. It's just a shining ball of crumpled paper. Just use your visualization and imagine you're tuning in to that ball of light. Okay? And by tuning in, I just mean you're feeling it. What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? And you take maybe 5 or 10 seconds to do that. What you're doing here is setting the intention that you're pulling a card for this particular energy. So you're going to shuffle your oracle cards, however you want to shuffle them. I think I'll do an episode solely about shuffling oracle cards later, but just shuffle your oracle cards however you want them and pull out a card and place it on the table next to that particular crumpled piece of paper. And this card represents the energy of the question of that piece of paper. So it's the answer to the question that you asked for that particular piece of paper. Now, before you actually even tune into that ball of paper, I obviously recommend that you ground. I'm doing an episode on grounding right after this episode, so you'll have some techniques to choose from. But grounding just means you relax, you calm down, you're in your body, you sort of are just in a stable place, as stable as you possibly can be. Then you tune into the energy, then you pull out the card. And now, when you pull out the card and you flip open the card to see what the card is, you're going to have writing equipment next to you. And the first thing you're going to do is capture your first thoughts. Any thought that comes to your mind, memory, feeling, sensation, whatever comes to you first, you're going to write it down immediately. You're not going to judge it. You're not going to think about it. You're not going to assess it. You're not going to criticize it. Your only job is to record. You're going to record those first impressions. Let's not even say the word thoughts. Let's say the word impressions. You're going to capture your first impressions. So you're furiously writing. You're furiously writing. Then after you're furiously done writing and all the impressions that came to you have been recorded, remember your only job is to record. It is not to analyze or interpret, just record. Then you're going to look at the card again, see if any more impressions come, write them down. You're not supposed to think about it, just record, just write. For a beginner who may not know how to tune into the energy of a card, what you can do is just answer the question, describe how the card makes you feel. How does this card make you feel? What does it remind you of? Write the answer to those questions. What are physical sensations you feel when you look at this card? What are the people in the card doing? Or what's happening in the card? Write down the answers to all those questions. And remember, again, I've said this like the 5th time, it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be written down. Okay? Now, what happens to me, at least, as I'm writing or recording my impressions, my mind will start trying to guess what the option is or what the question is. And I even write that down. I say, oh, my mind is trying to guess it's house number 2. Or my mind is trying to guess it's this particular question. Just acknowledge it, write it down, and continue writing. Don't try to shut your mind down or try to push it away. Your only job is to record everything. Okay? Write down everything. And like I said, I gave you a few prompts if you were a beginner. If you are an advanced person, you're going to be tempted to not record because you think, you're advanced, you don't need to record it. The whole purpose of this exercise is to get beyond your mind, which means your mind is not going to remember what you thought or felt with each of these cards. So you have to record it because that's the whole point. It is to record impressions when you have high bias or when you're full of doubt. So if you don't want to write, you can use audio, you can use video, you can type, it doesn't matter. Okay, but I prefer writing because it's more accessible to your intuition to write than it is to type or than it is to speak sometimes, depending upon the person. So those are some tips I would give you if you were advanced. And for you, you can use the same tips I recommended for beginners with those prompts, or you can just describe how the energy of the card and describe it intuitively. Now, the reason I'm not saying to read descriptions in the accompanying book of the Oracle card deck or of the tarot deck, whatever you're using, is for the simple reason that you have to develop faith in your own intuition and not in the cards. The cards are a prop, they are a tool. You are the intuitive device. You are the lightning rod, or you are the lightning and the cards are your lightning rod, however you want to use that analogy. You are the animating force. So we want to be able to develop trust in our cards, right? That is one of the reasons why we do this, and trust in our intuition. So just avoid looking at the book for now. Just use your own intuition. Now, once you're satisfied with the first card, repeat the same process with every piece of crumpled paper from start to finish. And again, if you need these steps outlined for you, they're in the ritual guide that accompanies every episode. They're in the accompanying ritual guide for this episode. I've also given you pictures of the setup just to show you what it could look like if you need a visual aid. And it's all in the ritual guide. The one thing I will say is that you can adapt this method to many things. So for example, one of the ways I mentioned to you was the double blind reading experiment. So this is when I'm trying to develop trust in my intuition again, or trust in my cards because it's a brand new deck. I don't know the question and I don't know the answer. This is how I do it. I will write down 3 separate questions that are unrelated to each other. For example, let's just take a simple analysis. Let's say it's Monday and I want to know what energy will be available to me or what energy I should work on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. One question is, what is the energy of Tuesday? Let's just say that's what it is. Okay, let me just rewind. Just ask the question, what's the energy of Tuesday on one piece of paper? What's the energy of Wednesday on another piece of paper? What's the energy of Thursday on another piece of paper? And I crumple all those pieces of paper up. Now, I don't know which day I'm going to pick up first, right? Let's say I pick up the first ball of paper and I take an oracle card and I put it out for that piece of paper. I'm not looking at that oracle card yet. Okay, they're all face down. So I pick another piece of paper, put it down, and I pick out another oracle card and I put that down for the second piece of paper, and same for the third one. Now, all 3 cards are laying on your table and you've just left them there with the crumpled piece of paper. You've just left them there. Now, let's say it's the end of Tuesday now. All I'm going to do is record my impressions of the day and the energy of the day, maybe what I wish had happened, maybe what didn't happen, and I just write it down as a record. I do the same thing end of Wednesday and end of Thursday. Then when Friday comes, I open each crumpled paper and each card. And then I look and then I write down the energy of the card and the question. Okay? What would be really cool is that you don't actually open the pieces of paper. I'm sorry I'm being all over the place because I'm trying to imagine this as I'm talking to you, because I've done this a few times, but not enough to be able to say this with any kind of eloquence. What you can do on Friday is you can open both the pieces of paper and the card and describe what the energy is. Or if you want to make it really blind, you can just open the cards and read them one by one, and then try to see if you can guess which card matched your impressions that you wrote down for the 3 days. And then open up the pieces of paper for each card to see whether you're right or how your cards speak to you. And you're sort of developing your intuition by developing trust in it, because you might see, and you likely will see, that the impressions you noted down are very similar to the oracle cards that were pulled out. And now you have your own language, your own special way that your cards speak to you and how they speak to you. And for the rest of the time that you work with this deck, you will always remember the energy of the card and how it presented in your life, which just gives you more, it gives you an intuitive library of symbols and stories and tools to draw from when you're reading for yourself in the future or when you're reading for a client. So isn't that really special? That's the double blind reading experiment. So you don't know the question, you don't know the answer. And then when the time comes for you to explore what those answers are, maybe you only explore the answer one at a time and then try to guess based on your impressions. Or you open both the answer and the question and read the energy of the card. That's the double blind reading. The other type of blind reading you can do is, let's say your question isn't about options. We go back to the first way, which is just a normal blind reading where you don't know the question. Maybe it's not about options. Maybe it's about a single situation. For example, you're in a relationship and you don't know where this is headed and you're not quite sure what to do. Maybe the topic is relationship, but you're trying to analyze it from different points of view. So maybe your first question is, how does my partner feel about me? Second question, how do I feel about my partner? Third question, where is this relationship headed? Fourth question, what can I do to improve the relationship? Fifth question is, yes, I need to leave the relationship. Sixth question is, no, I don't need to leave the relationship. Seventh question is, maybe, but not right now. You can architect this however you like. And they're not necessarily options for one question, but they are sort of exploratory questions for the same topic. And because it's relationships and a lot of people have a lot of anxiety over that, this blind reading can sort of help with mitigating that anxiety before you ask the question. And if you have really high anxiety about a specific topic, maybe you address 1 or 2 questions per day and gently evaluate that over the period of a few days. Don't open up cards for each option all at once. And that gives your mind a little bit of a break so it doesn't have a lot of anxiety. Again, this whole episode is about, it runs the spectrum from just doing it for fun and developing trust to a little bit more of, shall we say, not so pleasant emotions like dealing with anxiety or fear or bias or not feeling like your intuition is particularly available in the moment. I would suggest that when you learn anything new in this life, you have to try this method. You have to try it a few times on a variety of low risk areas for you to be able to be proficient at it or a master at it in high risk areas. So with this method, try it using the day reading method the double blind method, because you're developing trust in not only your cards, but also in the method itself. Try it a few times over the span of a few weeks, and then go into high risk topics like the ones I described before. A low risk topic is always, what energy does Wednesday bring for me to notice and expand on? That's a lower risk topic. Or what food should I eat on Wednesday? And you won't know the answer to that until Friday or Thursday comes along because you're reading it in hindsight, but it will explain things to you in a way that makes sense to you. So like I said, I've put the pictures up in the ritual guide. I've also outlined the process in the ritual guide. And yeah, let me know how this goes for you and send me pictures of your setup for your oracle cards. And maybe I'll post them up on my stories as examples of how people can do these readings. And if you have any specific questions about this method, or really any questions you have about oracle cards or intuition, send them to me and I can make episodes based on that, because we can always clarify this and hone this further depending upon how you're understanding it and how you're working with it. And yeah, please send me pictures of your setup. It'll be so cool to see. So until next time, my lovelies, may your intuition be a source of stability for your dignity.